What's up, everyone? We're back. Another episode of Wheel Wednesday, Behind the Wheel podcast. I'm here with Mr. Scott Weiss. And we're wearing we're wearing some headsets today. So, you guys know what that means, that we have a guest with us. We're going to be talking about some Mitsubishi DSM stuff, and none other. We're going to be having Miguel DSM, who is a YouTuber, influencer, and with his brand Race Legacy. So
yeah, I think it's going to be a good conversation because we all know that I have a big DSM background, and it's nice to talk to somebody else that also appreciates all that is DSM.
Yeah. So Miguel, how are you? What's going on?
I appreciate you, first of all, for having me out here, and from a marketing perspective, I think what you guys are doing is genius, and honestly, I love podcasts, especially when it comes to automotive. I feel like there's not too many, and it's awesome.
Appreciate that. I mean, I don't know what the hell we're doing here, to be honest with you. I question it. We've been doing it for more than a few years now, and I think it's interesting to see who actually watches or listens to it. But we appreciate you taking your time to kind of enter into our sphere for a little bit.
Absolutely.
It looks very fun. I've tried the whole podcast thing myself, and it's very difficult. And I know it's very expensive as far as the equipment, so it's awesome.
No, not around here. Us at Koenig, money grows on trees. So meanwhile, we're like sitting on milk crates.
Yeah. But a lot of our podcast stuff that we do normally stems from like in office conversations. Would you say?
It's brutal.
Yeah,
like I would say our rate of cursing at each other when we talk about cars increases exponentially.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's just one of those things. How could you be a car person and not feel passionate about certain things, right?
Yeah. Especially because go ahead.
Sorry about that. We all have these conversations with our fellow enthusiasts. It's awesome that you guys get to share it, and I'm sure a lot of people are going to relate to you guys as well. So
either that, or we get a lot of good comments where people are ragging on us. So that's it's one of those two things. Yeah,
they see a little clip or something like that, they take it as absolute. They don't watch the podcast and they yell at us. But even with that, like we have a couple people who are sales guys here that love the Audi Volkswagen stuff, and like when I think of the Audi stuff now, how they do all the all-wheel drive stuff and the that kind of power plant, they're kind of the I don't know, I guess they're kind of like the go-to for all-wheel drive luxury, right? Like that's kind of where they kind of solidified themselves in the time being.
Okay,
right? Is it not fair to say?
No, I mean, I guess it's fair to say. I don't know that I would, that I guess when I think about Audi, I don't immediately be like, oh, they're the all-wheel drive. But I understand what you mean. I can see your point.
Well, that's how they kind of separated themselves from some of their other competitors or whatever earlier on. But that made us have the conversation on, what kind of stemmed from, the all-wheel drive turbo platform. Where we were discussing about how Mitsubishi in the late 80s, early 90s or whatever, how they were kind of more or less the pioneers for that platform.
To be fair, before Miguel gets to add some endpoint, just to be totally honest, Miguel, the conversation wasn't exactly that. I think the conversation, and part of my French here, was how is it possible that Mitsubishi could have such a stronghold on that all-wheel drive turbo market and make such shit cars to the point where they're barely in business today? I think that was the conversation.
Okay. So maybe I butchered it a little bit, but when I add on a little bit of thoughts, whatever, I guess I got trailed off. But that's kind of more or less where we're at with it as well.
So the way I see it, I think Audi is what modern day Mitsubishi would have been if they would have actually focused on their automotive sector. So as all of us know, I think Mitsubishi is just much more than just cars. And I think Mitsubishi doesn't really care for their automotive, part, which is I think why they left to their downfall and why they're not really relevant as far as like the all-wheel drive turbo space. Audi did a really good job nowadays. I feel like with their RS3 and stuff like that, where like their cars are really quick. Their all-wheel drive systems is very just up to date. And they're really good cars. They're very quick. So that's just the way I see it. I think Audi is the modern day Mitsubishi right now.
For any of the viewers or people listening or whatever, I mean, just to get a little idea of what you do, I mean, can you just tell them a little bit about some of the platforms that you've worked with and why you go by Miguel DSM?
Okay, so I've always loved Mitsubishi Eclipses growing up, since Fast and the Furious, Need for Speed Underground. My dad used to have a Mitsubishi Eclipse GSX. I always tell this story everywhere. He promised to give it to me as my first car when I was like 16, 17, when I got my driver's permit. He sold it because we needed a 4-door sedan.
Oh, Dad, what the heck?
So the day he sold it, I remember just crying and being like, you know what? Like, I wanted Mitsubishi Eclipse as my first project car. And then, 6-7 years later, getting out of high school, working my first job as a cashier at a 99-cent store, I got my first Eclipse.
Nice.
So that's how I was introduced into it. I always loved them growing up. Unfortunately, I got a non-turbo model. So anyone that's into DSMs knows that the non-turbo front-wheel drive variants are pretty much
garbage.
Yeah. So I got a lot of backlash. And at the time, Instagram had just come out. I had made my account, and I just started building my car to my liking. So aesthetically, I feel like I got it, kind of good, but it was still slow. I got a lot of hate from the local DSM guys with the GSXs and GSTs.
Yep.
And I ended up deciding to, swapping it with an Evo 84 G63. And
wait,
that's when
you swapped it?
Yeah, it's currently swapped. So it's actually not a real GSX.
God.
Yeah, it's a little bit different. And that's kind of the story of how Miguel DSM came about. I started my whole YouTube channel, and I kind of wanted to document the build. And I think that's kind of how I, came about. And yeah, that's kind of where I'm at today. It's just I kind of documented my car journey, and the car is where it's at today because of that.
So it's interesting because like I probably have had less time to myself in the past few years than ever before. So, I get to see the content that these guys are like, oh, check this out or check that out, or you see his car and stuff like that. So I've watched some of your stuff, but I don't know that I went back far enough to really understand that it was a swapped GS or RS car. And so you did the all-wheel drive conversion to it.
Yeah. So initially we just did the front-wheel drive swap with a 3G Eclipse transmission.
Okay.
Getting torque steer everywhere. Didn't have I didn't have a tune or anything, and I just wanted to do the whole all-wheel drive conversion to make it worth it, right?
Right.
So it was kind of a guinea pig because no one had really done it before. And I think what helped me was the fact that I documented everyone and kind of pioneered it in a way to where anyone else doing it after me is able to kind of have some sort of reference to do it themselves. So we see more of them now today, but back when I was doing it back in like 2018, 2019, it wasn't really a thing.
So I have a couple questions about this, and now I feel a little stupid because I feel like I'm going to ask questions that maybe are redundant to your audience, but bear with me. Maybe there's some people that are on our podcast or are watching our podcast that don't know explicitly about you. So there might be 2 or 3 of them out there at this point. So my question is, now, for those of you that know the car, understand that taking a front-wheel drive car, this wasn't the same as just swapping parts over, because that car would have been missing a transmission tunnel for drive shaft. It would have been having an issue with the fuel tank, because an all-wheel drive fuel tank has the hump that would go over the 2 sides, so a suction area goes. It's like a saddlebag tank to kind of go around the rear end of the car to be to allow fuel to kind of suction through the hump and allow it to work on both sides, or else you would just have an issue where basically one side of the tank would end up and you would be empty on the other side. So you did that. You took why? That's a lot of work. Why not just get a GSX, even if it was one that maybe needed some love?
So 2 things. I was too sentimentally attached to the car at that time. I was too young. And the other reason is because the chassis, technically, it's still the same. It already had the tunnel, and I could.
Oh, good. All right.
Yeah, I basically used the GSX ram, the gas tank, and everything, the subframe, and the knuckles and the axles to basically make it all fit. All the custom work was done through the drive shaft, the front end, and mix and matching Evo parts up front to make it work. So
that's cool.
A lot of research and stuff like that, but that's kind of why I did it. At one point, I was going to sell the car and just get a GSX. Back then, they were actually really cheap to acquire. You're talking like $3,000 for a GSX. That's a whole different topic. I think they're really expensive now, but back then I could have sold my Eclipse and just bought a GSX, and I would have been okay. But I'm honestly glad that I did what I did, because if it wasn't for that, I don't know where I would have been.
Well, and the one thing I know about kind of starting in that same juncture is I didn't start in the non-turbo car, but what I mean is like, you learn so much in the course of swapping and building and doing that you can't, like, a lot of that stuff and the fabrication, the different points that you had to fabricate. Like, I could think about even the first swap I did where I had to do a custom drive shaft. There's some work there, and there's also some learning curve about matching pinion angles and being able to measure the drive shaft and know that you're going to have the right, slip spaces for the for the slip joints to go into. So now, what transmission did you end up using?
An Evo 4 transmission. It's a complete Frankenstein. So it's an Evo 8 motor, Evo 4 transmission, Evo 4 transfer case, Evo 5 axles, GSX drive shaft that was cut 6 inches, and then we had to add the Evo yoke to basically be able to fit. And then we had to match the gear ratios between the transfer case and rear differential from an automatic GSX to make it work.
Wow.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So why not? Why didn't you try to find some of these individual pieces from an actual GSX and swap and put those into the car? Was it really just primarily because, hey, I'm using an Evo 8, and for those that aren't familiar, an Evo 8 would have basically the head is kind of flipped in that sense that the intake side is on the opposite side of the car, which would have been the side that your non-turbo would have come with. So was there some of that? Like, what was the thought there?
Yeah, so the engine orientation on the non-turbo chassis versus the turbo chassis is just like that. So basically, the Evo 8 4G63, basically any Evo 4 to Evo 9 engine will fit into the non-turbo chassis.
Yeah.
As far as the motor mount goes, you do have to fabricate the transmission mount, and the rear mount also just slips right in. So this swap is only feasible for the non-turbo guys. The GSC and GSX guys already have a 4G63, so it's not really worth swapping things for more modern 4G63 based off their potential. But some people still do it, but that's kind of the main reason why. It just worked.
Yeah. So that's interesting. So let's see, Evo 4. So you have an Evo 4 bottom end. So that would have been the equivalent of what would have been a 7-bolt, correct?
Yeah, they're 7 bolts. So basically, any Evo 4 to Evo 9 4G63, I think they're pretty much the same. I'm not sure if the internals are slightly different, but everything fits. That's so crazy. The only reason why they're mixed and matched is because it's the parts that I was able to find at the time. The Evo 4 transmission and transfer case came together for like $1,000, so I thought it was a really good deal.
Right.
Versus you just buy like an Evo 8 transmission that was like $2,000, and it was just based off my budget, and it just kind of worked. So I started the swap. I started getting parts together, and that's kind of how it all happened.
Yeah, it's funny. It's like when you started doing that swap. I mean, maybe the cars are cheap, like you said, like now just because of the rarity of ones that are actually not full of rust or still together. The cars are probably, obviously priced a little higher, probably in that 11 to 12 to 15 to 17, depending on how nice the cars are, $1,000 range, right? So, even at that point, sourcing some of the parts for maybe for an Eclipse or whatever it is, if you were trying to get some of these things, it would have been somewhat difficult because at that point, now the car was 20-something years old. And I know that even in my tenure with DSMs, toward the end, you had to be a little bit crafty with knowing who to know to grab some parts. So I would say that the better choice at that time, doing the Evo stuff, would have opened up those options. But now I would say, whoa, you're right back in the same boat.
Yeah, at this point, it just gets more expensive.
Yeah, no doubt.
So it just depends on who wants to do it. It depends on. At this point, I think it's just better to find a GSX or a GST and do a conversion.
Right. So what do you think? Like, see, all right. So what's interesting is, I am older than you. There's no doubt about this now. You look way better than I do, so I think that's one proven fact. The second thing is, I remember when these cars were like, really starting to first come out, right? So I wasn't of driving age yet, so I'm not gonna super throw myself under a bus. Yeah. But so I got my first DSM. I bought my first DSM in 2001.
Wow. Okay.
And to bring people back to history lane for just a moment, I bought it. So I had a 97 GSX in 2001.
Sweet.
It had high mileage for the time. It had 103,000 miles or whatever, or 99,000 miles on it. But it was completely stock except for an upper intercooler pipe, an epoxy blow-off valve that was venting, and an epoxy exhaust. Right? Everything else was bone stock.
Those are the popular exhaust. The epoxy N1 and the thermal R&D were like the exhaust back in the
Exactly days. Right. So So I bought this car, and just to be 100% honest, I really didn't know how to drive stick.
Mm-hmm.
So, but like, this is the car I wanted. I wanted this car. So I bought this car. So by the time the car, I had paid, we bought the car. By the time the car had actually made its way to my house, I had more boxes and parts than I knew what to do with, because I had been like saving for this thing to happen. The entire first week was basically just me putting all these parts on the car. That's all I did for the first week.
So quick question. Did you know how to work on cars at the time?
Yes, but not as proficient as I would become only about a year later.
Yeah, DSMs do that. So they say they turn people into mechanics.
Well, and for us, I mean, just to kind of date this out, is that like back then when we started with a car, a big 16G was a big turbo for those cars.
It still is today.
Well, I think. It's interesting. I think it's a good turbo for those cars, but watching when I remember when the 20G came out, and we put a 20G on, and I remember thinking that I had a rocket ship.
Yeah, that's what everyone says.
I know. And then, but when we started this whole thing, there was a limitation, because like back then 550, injectors, everybody used to like run like RC 550 injectors, and like that was a pretty big injector, right? And you could only control it with an AFC so much. Once you kind of ticked up from there, because an AFC usually only does about 35 to 40% fuel control. At that point, we were doing other things, but there wasn't anything else really available without doing like a universal standalone, right? So we were doing things such as hacking the masses. We would take the honeycombs out of different parts of the mass to try to lean out the mixture, and using math translators and stuff like that.
So what's crazy is like how DSMs had so much potential with the knowledge and parts that we had like accessible at the time. Like imagine if DSMs were new today, and with the knowledge and technology that we have today, the amount of power we could put out with those cars. Because obviously age is a huge factor, and that's going to determine how reliable it is with high performance mods. But it's crazy how much they put out with the little amount of things that you guys had back in the day.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I remember thinking, like, I remember being there and watching one of the local guys that we knew that was in kind of our little club back in the day there, and I remember him going 12.7, and we were like, oh my god, lightning, right? I mean, this is at the time where a 10-second run was
yeah,
you know what I mean? So I remember that happening, and all the crap that we had to go through to make parts for these cars. And still, that was probably one of the platforms that was the most available aftermarket aside from a Honda. Yeah. So it wasn't like we were venturing into platforms that hadn't been, used there. Those were pretty popular cars back in the day. And as things got a little older, they certainly showed up. I mean, between the 1Gs and the 2Gs and Galant VR4s and all those cool cars, you really had kind of a really nice run that Mitsubishi put out with that Diamond Star partnership.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's wild, man. Like it always be. This is the part that always gets me. This is the part that gets me all the time. How did a company that was so far woven into sport compact and in that tuning segment, how did they bring cars that were so good? Now, when I say so good, I want everybody to be very clear what I mean. I'm not talking about they're so good as far as like the bodies didn't rust or they didn't have mechanical issues. I'm saying there was not another car, and I don't care what you say, Subaru owners, there was not one other car, even during that time, WRX didn't matter, that you could make as much power for a dollar as that DSM platform.
Right.
Even today, I think so. There's not many platforms that can do that, honestly. It's amazing.
It really is amazing, right? Like, and I bet you, like, on your, like, how much power does your I was about to call it an Evo, but how much power does your DSM make?
I make 440 to the wheels on a 16G turbo.
You still have a 16G?
Yeah, very mild.
Very nice. I mean, that's a good power number for a 16G.
I'm on a standalone. I'm also on ethanol.
Okay, that helps a lot. That helps a lot. Just to really throw another curveball into the date issue, back then we didn't really have ethanol fuel, right. But what we used to do is we used to use a methanol water injection kit. So there was two different types of kits that we used to try to do. One was kind of a standard thing that you would put like almost like this jet that was right before the throttle body. And then eventually we got into actually doing more like direct port, where it's almost like a kind of like jetted, like a nitrous system, where you're basically trying to have the nozzle kind of right in that intake runner, right? The downside about doing the one main injector kit was that you would spray water, and the natural flow of that water methanol injection would spray it down the plenum there, right? Mm-hmm. You would always have a lean condition by the time it would get to that first cylinder, by the time it would make it all the way down. So then we started trying to figure out how to get the nozzles equal to each runner. But now you put it in the fuel, and the fuel is just such a better octane.
Correct.
Man, that's great power on an Evo 16G, right?
Definitely. And honestly, it's a very fun street car because it's a very linear power band, and there's no sort of lag. So as soon as it hits like 3,000, it kicks in right away.
Okay, cams?
HKS 272s.
Oh, you have real HKS 272s?
Correct. That's all the head has, actually.
Okay. All right. So you don't have dual retainers, you don't have anything like that?
No. So I'm currently doing an Evo build right now. We're doing the kidney racing, springs and retainers, Kelford cams, and what else? We're going forward facing, precision 58. So I'm trying to go a little bit bigger as far as power output. But honestly, if you want like a street car, like the perfect street DSM, I think 400 to 500 horsepower is it's a sweet number.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
I agree, because you have a good linear usable power band. By the time I sold my car in 2010, my car was just cracking 700 all wheel.
Wow.
Yeah, the car was good, but like, that's when ball bearing turbos really just hit on, right? So like my last turbo was a ball bearing turbo, but before that everything was journal bearing. Like 60-1 I was using for years, a couple years, and then my last turbo, I think I went to a Force Performance 3065, and then I think I had just put on a 6062 from Precision, and then ultimately ended up going back to 3065 before I sold the car. But, these were huge turbo. 35, a GT35R back in the day, it still required some effort to make it spool.
How reliable was your car back in the day?
I used it. It made power. I don't know. I think that's a hard question to answer. So from my perspective, I also didn't daily drive the car, right? So I think that that's kind of my thing. Like I seem to always end up having a beater or a daily, and I tend not to really. Once I get to that point where I'm like, kind of concerned with, like I don't want to have to like putting this car together all the time. I think I learned. Oh yeah. And I learned a lot. I learned so much about how to put things together and stop problems from happening before they started. And I think that that's a huge thing that some people don't have the opportunity to do anymore, right?
I think modern day enthusiasts, especially with DSMs, they just don't really care to go through this stage of the maintenance and just making sure that the car is actually running right before they do any sort of performance mods. And I saw that, because I got my Eclipse in 2012, and back then they were so accessible that everyone was just putting big turbos on them, not tuning them, breaking them, and then parting them out or giving them to the next guy or junking them. Because they were so accessible. So it's something that I always preach to, the Mitsubishi guys, is like the whole reason why we're known for being unreliable is because no one takes care of them.
Yeah.
That's just the sad reality.
I think something that comes to my head when I think about why people don't look to some of the Mitsubishis in today, like right now, besides some of the obvious reasons, but they haven't put out anything that was all that spectacular after the 2G Eclipse and then Evo 8, 9, 10. But besides the Evo, there hasn't really been anything else for quite a while. So if you're looking at an older platform that you want to get into, I mean, you got to go back 25 years to get into the Eclipses, the ones that people want to work on. And if you're looking at older cars within the last 25 years, then all of a sudden you have a lot of options. You know,
so the whole reason the third generation Eclipse came out as a front wheel drive variant with a non-turbo was because they didn't want it to compete with the Evo, because the Evo came into the States in 2003 and they wanted that to be like their hero car. So
yeah,
understandable, but I think that's kind of the direction they went into it. And then, you know, the fourth gen Eclipse wasn't even profitable for Mitsubishi. That's why they cut it, you know, short. And then they even brought it back as a crossover. So that's like the huge.
Yeah, when's the Miguel DSM channel going to pick up a Eclipse Cross?
I don't see myself ever doing it. I would honestly love to pick up, you know, an Eclipse if they were to ever bring it back as an all-wheel drive variant. At least, you know, some sort of hybrid combination where it's turbo and, you know, EV. Yeah. It's just based off technology, but, you know, it's kind of sad that the DSM days are dead. So
right.
Yeah, there's there's really no. So when you start to think about the car companies that had tremendous followings and this whole thing, you have to start with something that everybody wants. They lust over, right? It doesn't matter. Honda's like the one thing that they had going for them. They had a lot of aftermarket support. In addition to that, they also had, you know, engines that were really good at the time. You know, the B series, H series. Some people even argue J series. Some of these engines were really good to be able to do a lot of swaps, and they made power reliably. Now, not as much, but like a DSM was one of those cars that could make a fair amount of power, and the only thing you had to worry about was keeping them from falling apart. and I say that like as much as I'm joking about it, I'm also really serious.
Yeah.
Right. The cars were temperamental, but largely because when you took a car that came from the factory with, let's say, 200 horsepower, but then you were making 500, and some of the parts that you were using were mainly based off of that. I mean, think about what that looks like. That's like a crazy increase.
Yeah.
I don't think Mitsubishi was expecting that.
No, right?
So.
Yeah. It was wild. So, like, there was things that I think, you learned along the ways, I think, that sometimes made the cars hold together more. Like, back then, you think you have an intercooler pipe. Well, it's fine when you're running 15 pounds of boost, but what happens when you end up running 30 pounds of boost, right? Like, then all of a sudden, nowadays they have, those connecting bars that you would weld a piece on each end or use one of those Wiggins clamps or something like that.
That's correct.
Yeah, to like hold everything together. But back then, that stuff was crazy money. So we got into the habit of like figuring out our own tricks. I used to use hairspray. So,
that's on the forums. That's on DSM tuners.
Is it?
It's just so it's stickier.
Yeah. So what we used to do is we used to spray the elbows and the intercooler pipes right where the thing was with hairspray. Right. We'd spray them inside the silicone coupler. We'd put the silicone coupler on as tight as we could. We'd let it dry, and then we would do the same thing onto the throttle body, elbow, whatever it was, and then we would clamp them down. And if you did that just in the area before it got super tacky, that stuff would give you a little bit more of, oomph.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense.
Yeah.
I got to see a little bit of that growing up with my DSM as well.
Yeah. So it's like all those little things, but like you put all those little things together for a whole bunch of different parts of the car, and then you got something that was more reliable than somebody else's.
Yeah. I mean, for Miguel, with the DSM platforms or whatever, I know that some of the newer stuff is not really considered DSM, to the diehards or whatever. But I mean, you still have experience with basically all the other good platforms that Mitsubishi offered, which were, the VR4, the GTO, and you have an Evo 8 as well, right?
So Evo 9 and 3000.
So he has the trifecta. You know what I mean?
Tell me about that VR4. We got anything done to it?
So it's pretty basic. I got it 3 years ago. It was sitting for like 8 years. It's been having fuel system issues with me for like this whole time. But it's just from my intercooler intake, full exhaust, bigger injectors, bigger fuel pump, and a slight flash on the stock 98 ECU.
Oh,
so
crazy.
It's one of those cars that I wouldn't really want to modify extensively just because of the 6G72 platform being parts are very expensive. It's really hard to work on just because there's no space, especially compared to 4G. And it's one of those cars. It's just like it's very expensive to maintain. It's very expensive to repair, especially with mechanics. So if you don't know what you're doing and you go to a mechanic, he's going to surcharge you just because they know it's a car that not a lot of people want to work on.
Yeah.
So it's a car that honestly out of the three gets the most attention in person because it's so big and it's bright red, and it's honestly, I think it's like Mitsubishi's like most beautiful like car in my opinion.
Looks wise, I would probably agree with that too.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, you know, like
those cars. Like, by the way, like I've changed turbos on those cars multiple times, and like you had like it was easier just to take the engine out. So we used to take the engine out, change turbos, especially if we got anything that was going to be a little bit larger. But yeah, it's a cool car. The only problem with that car was it was so heavy.
Yeah.
3,800 pounds.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a
You know
big
what I mean?
a big boy.
It is a big boy, but there is something about being inside of it that makes you feel like you're in. I mean, it was a substantial car.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you know, really though, like when you look at some cars that are just kind of slept on and forgot about, the 3000 GT and the Dodge Stealth, they're like forgotten cars. You don't really hear people talk about them.
Yeah.
So it's the equivalent to the Supra and the GTR. I mean,
right. That's the way that I would have phrased it too. But I think that a lot of people would almost scoff at you if you say that.
Well, legacy-wise, I think that's the only difference.
Okay, I mean, you know, but reality, I mean, it really is on the same kind of level as cars like that. But for some reason, it just kind of got left behind. Yeah,
I think it happened just because of the transverse layout of the engine. I think that the inline six on the Supras and the GTRs are a lot easier to work on, and the aftermarket support for those cars is just that much more available.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think that was a downfall to the 3000 GT. I think it was a 6G.
Mitsubishi held on to what they knew by, doing that same mount, but also because that's how the configuration was with the transfer case coming off the side to be able to make it all-wheel drive, right? So, yeah, it's a tougher car to work on. So you have these cars, and I know, and I want to talk about the platform you ventured off into, but out of those three cars right now, that we've spoken about, what would you say is your favorite one to drive?
The Eclipse has the rawest feeling just because everything has been touched in that car, from interior to engine bay to exterior, and it feels no power steering, no AC, bucket seats. It's an open downpipe. It's really loud. The speed density, so I vent to atmosphere with a blowout valve, and it's just one of those cars that's when it's driving down the street, it's crazy. The Evo by default is one of those cars that is raw compared to basically everything else.
Yeah.
And the 3000 GT is one of those cars that you just want to cruise in. You don't really want to go fast, and it just looks good. That's the way I see them. But my favorite is for sure the DSM.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
I like that. So you've also ventured into some other platforms.
Recently, I ventured into Honda. So got myself an RSX with a K series. And honestly, I've always been not a hater with the Honda guys, but just, because I've always been a big Mitsu guys, I've always kind of steered away from Hondas just based off the reputation that we've had with each other. But based off me daily driving the RSX for the past, 8 months, it's honestly changed my mind. The K series drives different. It's a higher revving engine, and it's just different. But I definitely,
So that's your daily right now?
Correct. Yes.
So as Scott is with the DSM stuff, I mean, I'm more of the Honda guy, I guess, because I have experience with the Type S platform. I have experience with the K20 engine, DC5. I mean, so are you going to do anything to that? I know you did a lot of exterior stuff with the wrap and some cosmetic stuff, but are you going to build that as well?
So the goal with the RSX right now is to daily, and I definitely wanted to get into the whole time attack motorsport. So it's something that I just want to work on for myself, and I think the DC5 is a really good platform. One, because it's the K series, very accessible. The Honda is very reliable, and the times that I've only tracked it twice, but it's honestly a really fun track car. The Mitsubishis I wouldn't really trust at the track per se, just because I've broken my Evo at the drag strip. The DSM was actually just at a drag strip racing a Cybertruck. And I was having fuel system issues. So it's just one of those cars that's like, it can be fast, but at the same time, there's always a thought in the back of my mind where it's like, is it going to make it to where the Honda I know is just going to take the beating all day and all night? So
right. I mean,
that's just reality.
with the K20 with the RSX, I mean those things take the living hell of a beating. I know that like with real simple bolt-ons, I'm not talking about adding forced induction. If you're just doing simple bolt-ons and a tune, and you get a K Pro and just do a tune with that, I mean you can start pushing mid 250ish to the wheels, and all of a sudden that car is fast. It's a light.
Hold on a second.
No, listen, but like I
don't use the word fast and like it's not. It's quick,
Scott. It's gonna move, and it's gonna. This is not his. It's a daily.
Who cares?
But I'm just saying, all of a sudden, just a little bit of something that doesn't take a lot. You're talking bolt-ons and a tune. It's not much.
I'm just saying that when we use the word fast, if it can't pull the chocolate off a pudding, I don't want to hear about it.
This is where me and Scott never see eye to eye.
Because listen. All right, you come from a turbo car background. Yeah. Tell me that you don't just want to bolt a turbo on that car all the time.
The RSX feels gutless on the low end. But the thing is, the RSX feels so nimble. The thing is, the Honda guys have over the Mitsu guys. It's just the power to weight ratio.
Yeah.
Like if you add forced induction to the K series, it's all of a sudden it's fast. Yeah, it's really fast.
But everyone knows that Honda struggled with torque on the low end for everything. Always. I mean, that's always been their problem.
Okay.
But but all I'm saying is that with the high revving engine, all it is, all of a sudden with a little bit of extra power, you really feel it immediately. I mean,
when my Eclipse was making in the mid 500 horsepower range, all wheel, right? It had a big turbo and stuff like that. My friend had an EK, and the EK had a 60-1 at the time. We were using similar turbos, and I remember so we go from a slight roll, but we were still low mile per hour. Like we were probably maybe 20 miles an hour.
Mm-hmm.
We go. I just destroyed him off the line. I feel
Go
like
figure.
I feel like I'm so far ahead of him. I can't even see him. I can't even see him anymore.
Out
of nowhere, I hear, and it's getting louder, and I'm like, what the hell? And he goes by me like I'm standing still. Now, the thing is, it's like, he had nothing down low, but he was a turbo, big turbo B series. And he just, I was standing still. I remember thinking, you got to be kidding me. This is all I got.
My point to me saying that wasn't saying that it's going to be the fastest car on the road. I'll tell you, if you do want to do a turbo onto it, all of a sudden that you elevate that thing to you're the freaking man. I don't know.
But you can't use it from a roll, right?
I guess, you're going to get that tire spin and a little wheel hop and whatnot. So, but that's just a downfall. And then you get to brag to people that, hey, I catched up to you in a front wheel drive car, so.
So the Hondas have the underdog thing going on.
Right.
I mean, you could always make them all-wheel drive and turbo, but the thing is Mitsubishi already comes like that from factory. All you got to do is add some bolt-ons, ethanol, and you're beating everything on the street.
Yeah.
So let's throw around some more crap talking. What do you think? What would you say to somebody that, let's say, owns a WRX or even an STI? Same vintage generation as, let's say, your Evo, right?
Mm-hmm.
What would you say to them about who has the more power potential?
Well, I think everyone knows by now that the 4G63 does.
Yeah. Do you see what he did there, everyone? Let's hold on. That's a breathable moment. Let's just slow down for a second.
I'm not advocating on the Subaru side, but I will say this is what they would say. They're gonna say the EJ motors, etc., exclude them, whatever. Obviously, they had a lot of problems with them, but when you look at the FA motors that Subaru has, they're pretty damn good. I know the time.
Let's just take a minute to acknowledge what Miguel just said there. He's implying that we all know what's about to happen here.
I think I'm not saying it's a fact, but I think it's just the most popular vote as far as people. You just don't see as many fast, Subarus as you do Mitsubishis. It's just
but the Mitsubishi guys, when you guys are talking about the 4G or whatever, the one engine you guys don't talk about is going to be the what is it, the 4B11?
Yeah,
I don't really think that. I'll be honest with you. I struggle with that whole Evo 10 thing.
Hey, I'm just saying. You guys like to conveniently leave that one out.
So that happens because the 4G6 already has a huge heritage. We're talking a couple of decades worth of being alive. The 4B11 came out in 2008 with the Evo 10. So the fact that the 4B11 is able to keep up with the 4G63 today just shows the capabilities of the engine. So if the 4G11 was out just as much as a 4G63, I think it would have been, it would actually have a lot more popularity. So I don't think it's not enough time to really determine if it's, a really good engine or not, but it's proven itself.
Look, here's the thing. Here's my thoughts on this whole thing, because everybody, I'm sure, out there really gives a crap what I think. I think that, there is something about the same way people are still lusting after B series when we know that a K series theoretically will outperform on most metrics that we're going to measure by, right? There is something about having that nostalgia. There's something about having that pedigree and history that comes with a 4G63.
Which is not something you'll hear Subaru owners say. No one's lusting over the older engines.
They do have an extensive rally history, and they have the things. And I think that Subarus are good for certain things. I don't think those are cars that... If I wanted to take an STI... And I wanted to, and look, here's where we go with all the shots fired. This is what's going to happen. This is going to be the clip out that Max uses.
To be fair, Scott had a Subaru.
Roasting me in the comments.
Well, to be fair, Scott, you should tell the people that you've had a bug eye.
I've had these cars.
As Mitsubishi guys, we secretly would all love to own, I think, Subarus. I wouldn't mind a blob eye or a hawk eye, but honestly, I would put a 4G63 in it and just make all
man. So I got to tell you, I've swapped a few cars with 4Gs back in the day because that's what we had laying around. They were a lot more cumbersome. I mean, a lot more available than not, right? So I put one into an FD-RX-7. Boy, do I wish I didn't do that. It wasn't my car, so,
That's actually something I really want to do if I was to own an FD.
Okay. So we did an FD. We've done a few into Starions. My friend Dave has a great Starion that has this swap. Let's try to think where else we put him in. We did.
Would you put it in a Porsche 911, like an old school one?
No, I wouldn't do that, everyone. Okay. I wanna make it very clear for the record that I would not do that, everyone. So don't hurt me. I would say Porsche diehards are got to be up there with the most extreme. But I will tell you, just to make sure that I round out the field here, that one of the bucket list swaps that I look for on Facebook Marketplace every night. Because by the way, are you really a car guy if you don't check Facebook Marketplace before you go to sleep every night?
Very true.
Right. I always look for like a 997 911 with a blown engine because I would like to K-swap a 911, just like my friend Nick did. The amazing Nick, by Tuning by Nick, who put that swap together. That car is just so good.
Yeah.
And I would like to do one of those. So if anybody out there knows of any 997s that don't have maybe an engine, manual gearbox, hit me up.
Yeah.
But yeah, so like, I mean, I've had Subarus and I've done this whole thing, and I would say that if you want to make a Subaru just as fast as maybe you could do for the same dollars as a DSM or an Evo, I think you're going to have to multiply by 2.
Yeah. I agree.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's just the deal.
I guess so. I mean, I don't know. When the only thing I'm saying is if you compare some of the newer stuff to the newer stuff or whatever, then it becomes a different conversation.
Let me say this, because I feel like I've already been throwing my cojones out here. I might as well go ahead and throw some more.
Go for it.
I'm going to say that if you are arguing with me right now that for the same dollar, you think your STI can make the same power that you could do it for that same dollar with a DSM or an Evo, I'm going to say your car's not fast.
Hey, I mean,
because when you have listen, can we all get to with an Evo compared to an STI? Can you get them both to 400 horsepower for around the same dollar amount? I'm gonna say, okay,
yeah,
close. Once you depart from that power level and you start to creep north, that's where the boys and the men start to fall in different.
I wish I could just chime in Steve from Vinny 10 right now. Just get him in real quick.
I think he would agree.
I don't know. We'll see. But all right.
I almost want to get. Hold on. This is it. We're getting Steve on the phone right now. I can't. I'm gonna. Let's see if he answers. I don't know if he's gonna answer. But listen. I think he would agree. That's what I think he's gonna do. I'd be shocked. I'd be shocked. I mean, and I'm talking, if you're going to pull out all the stops, well, methanol and this, and we'll put in this fuel sex. I mean, no, come on. Like, let's get real here. But like, okay. Let's give it a shot.
Scott's going to phone in Steve from Vinny Town. Let's see what happens.
Let's see if he answers.
He'll answer, right?
No, I don't know if he might be working. I mean, some of us work. We don't just record podcasts.
That's true.
Let's see. This is a moment. I think this is a first. I don't think he's going to answer.
Let's see.
He's probably going to call me back like after we get out of the podcast. He's not going to answer. He's busy. He's actually working.
Yeah, he's tuning STIs.
Making gobs of power.
There we go.
What's going on?
Ah, man, you answered. This is so exciting. So, listen, we're actually recording a podcast right now, okay?
Oh, okay.
So here's what the argument we were just having, and I said and we were thinking there's nobody better than this. So I would make the statement that if you took an Evo comparatively to an STI, okay, and you would try to make the same power number once you get north of, let's say, 400 horsepower, that you could do so much more affordably on an Evo. You agree or you disagree as a Subaru person?
I will agree and disagree.
Oh,
Subaru answer. I love it.
okay.
Yes.
What's the disagree? Give me the disagree.
The disagree is the fact that the transmission and the diff on the Evo is glass compared to a Subaru. Or the STI, I should say, because WX transmission we all know is paper mache and hopes and dreams.
I understand.
So yes, I would say technically, if you want to be able to make 400 horsepower, you'll be able to make it probably more reliable. I wouldn't say reliably, but easier on an Evo. But that's even more so like a thing of the past. Like, I mean, I produce enough 400 horsepower street cars pretty regularly with Subarus, and they last for a really, really long time.
All right, but what are we talking about if we start to creep north of like 450? Do the men's and the boys start to get separated?
So like 500. I really think that the cost is to be reliable comes around the same, just different places you're spending the money. So
all right.
you're spending a ton of money on the engine, with the Subaru because the ring land failures and the cast pistons and stuff like that, and there's a whole other logic behind that as well. But yeah, being an Evo has 4G63 or the 4B11, which is more a traditional flat, inline motor. Parts are definitely a little bit easier to make, and the cost of that comes down. But as far as reliably, they kind of cost the same. You're just spending money in different spots.
Ooh, all right. Well, listen, I'll take your answer. We allowed the people to have another voice besides mine, so I feel like we've done justice. And now, maybe you'll be able to join me in the comments while everybody hates on us.
Yes, I will definitely help you out in the comments.
All right, we'll let you go back to actually doing something productive, Steve.
I was just about to tune in G37, actually.
Perfect. Nice. All right. Well, maybe there's an Evo 8 out there you could tune and make power much more affordably than the Subarus. I don't know. All right.
It's already got a chef training in it.
Oh, geez. All right, Steve. Thanks. All right. Bye.
Bye.
All right. So look, we brought on somebody that at least provide a counter opinion, so people won't hate on me that I'm just like stabbing others in the back.
I think he's right in that, especially I myself have pretty much blown my first gear on my Evo transmission, and the GSX transmissions are actually really easy to break once you start making a lot of power. So he does have a point. In regards to that.
Yeah, I mean, look, I guess I would say there's a validity to it in the sense of like I guess I built my 2G transmission pretty early on because of the fact that like. That was just it. When you're going to make power, it's not the power, it's the torque. When you start to make a good amount of torque, you're really thrashing on those things, and they just weren't designed for that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So now I asked you the question before. I'd be incorrect if I didn't ask you the question. You now have your daily driver, and you have these three beautiful gems that I love. What's your favorite car? If you're just you're just headed out, you got a nice Saturday, nothing really planned, you just want to go for a drive, do something like that. Which car are you driving?
Out of the ones I have?
Yeah.
The DSM.
Oh,
the DSM 2.
Okay.
It's just the driving experience with that car is just so unique.
Nice.
And I think it has to do a lot with the fact that it's my first car. There's meaning behind it, and it's one car that I've really touched every single button on. So it's just the driving experience is insane. On that.
I gotta ask him, what do you really do with the Evo then?
It's currently not running. The engine's out. So
that's the answer. Okay.
But I used to daily drive it back in college, and I pretty much just modified it. Bolt-ons E85, and then once I blew the transmission is kind of when it, fell apart. So
yeah,
I'm kind of on the process of bringing it back to life, and hopefully, be able to drive it a lot more once it's back.
Yeah, Evo 9 makes me jealous. I'll tell you that right now. I love that car.
they're good.
I really do.
They're cool looking cars.
It's insane how expensive they are nowadays. It's just ridiculous.
Yeah.
Good for you.
No, even 8s are expensive now. I mean everything's coming up. I don't know. 10s are getting there.
Same
but I do think there's a level of like symbolism though, where in the year of 2023 or 2022 when it was, or one of the 2 years, that Miguel DSM ventures off into a Honda platform and kind of moves away from the whole Mitsubishi thing, and I just thought there was a level of symbolism there of
so I don't want to be known just as a Mitsubishi guy. Like I would love to own, an FDRX7 with a 4G63. And then I would love to own like a 75, like 911 with a wide body and a 4G. Like I want to have that Mitsubishi heritage with me, but I also want to venture into other platforms as well.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's how I see it.
I like that. So now, all right. So now I'm going to ask you a question, and I'm going to give you 2 different answers to provide. Right. So I want to ask you, what's that dream car? But I know for car guys, it's too easy. Like if you ask me my dream car, I shudder because I'm like, well, at what price point?
Yeah.
Right. So I want to say, like, what's the dream car that you want to own? I don't want to say next, but in a sub $100,000 range. And then what's the ultimate dream car if budget wasn't an option?
Well, it would have to be the R35 GTR. That's one of the cars that I've always wanted.
Absolutely.
And it's just like the DSM. It's one of those cars that just makes a lot of power. Unfortunately, it's a little more expensive.
Yep.
And then if I had no budget and I had all the money for it, then it would have to be the Ferrari F40.
Okay.
That makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, that's that's right. That's
very respectable answer.
That's something.
No analog, still from that era, and it's one of those cars that if I had all the money in the world, then
yeah.
I like that. Those are 2 good choices. I like the R35s. I think that if you could get a north of 2015 GTR R35, and you could at least have, the money to do a tranny, because let's be honest, you should do a transmission. But they say that 2015 and up,
they fixed it, right?
They've done a lot of good work there, so you should be in a better shape. But like, let's say we're gonna throw some money at it. Let's throw 15 grand. Let's do the transmission, right? I think that car may be one of the ultimate daily drivers.
Oh yeah, definitely. That's the one car that can do anything. It could be exotics. You could drive it every day, and it's comfortable enough to where it's it's an awesome car.
Yeah. Not a car I think I'd want to drive on a track. I don't think it's known for that being awesome, but but it is I'm not talking about like drag. I'm talking about like, for that whole, like if you're going to really do road racing, like, maybe that's not it because it's, it's a little heavy or whatever, but man.
I think it's just too expensive for that.
I don't know if it handles and performs that well on the road racing track. I know, like, it was like that news thing when the Type R came out that would beat it around the Nürburgring. It beat the GTR around the Nürburgring and stuff like that. So, it just goes to show that it's probably just not the car for that. But,
Good car, though.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Do you see yourself at some point with venturing out into the GTR platforms?
Most definitely. It's just if the money's there, then yes.
We're gonna see the video title from Miguel's channel of just why I sold my X, Y, and Z, and then a week later he's gonna be like my new project, and it's gonna be an R35.
There's gonna be a new channel.
The video after that is I put Koenig wheels on my GTR.
Oh yeah,
that's what we're talking about, man.
Oh yeah, but I think there's gonna be a new channel popping up. It's gonna be like Miguel GTR, and then
I'll always be Miguel DSM to my roots.
Actually, technically, Nissan and Mitsubishi are in alliance right now. They're the same company as of right now.
I think the GTRs have Mitsubishi block,
right?
Well, but Nissan, I'm not.
They're both
there
Renault.
Was something about that, but also Nissan does a lot of stuff for Mercedes.
Okay. Well, right now I know that it's the Renault Nissan Mitsubishi thing right now, so technically you can still kind of blend it in there.
Mitsubishi's short for this world. We've been saying that for 20 years, though.
Yeah.
Sadly, right. Tell everybody that maybe, let's say for the 3 listeners here that don't know who you are and haven't, tell them what you kind of have planned in the upcoming months to a year on your channel. Anything they should look for?
Mainly just the Evo build. Just like I said, forward facing, bigger turbo, more of that, fixing the VR4 as well as I'm having fuel system issues, and just kind of really, get the cars together properly before I can jump into another build. Fortunately, cars are very expensive, and it's just like the whole content creation space is a whole other topic. But it's just one of those things that's just very, we could go on about this all day. But yeah, definitely just kind of focus on the Mitsubishis and just kind of keep growing the channel. And it's not easy, but it's definitely fun, and I love doing it. So.
Well, listen, I'm excited to talk to anybody that's for DSMs. That's number one. And number two, listen, you get stuck in any problems that have to do with the DSM world, throw us a message. I might know the answer. I know a lot of useless crap, so, let us know.
Awesome.
Thanks for the time. You have anything else that you want to do, Rich?
No, not really. If you guys are, watching whatever, and you guys are looking for some, DSM type of content, there's really nowhere else to go. Check out Miguel's channel. It's where it's at.
Sick.
So, besides that, I'm all wrapped up.
Nice. Listen, we appreciate you hanging out with us, and it's been good. Make sure everybody check out the DSM channel, Miguel DSM channel.
Yeah.
Make sure you throw him all the support for fixing that VR4, because that car needs to be on the street, and we're excited to see you get that Evo up and running as well.
Yeah, man.
I appreciate you guys having me as well.
Dude, thanks so much for coming on. It means a lot to us. It's nice to be able just to talk to car people, you know what I mean?
Definitely.
So
awesome.
That's it.
Yeah.
Well, everyone, it's been another beautiful episode that we've been hanging with you. We appreciate you hanging with us. Don't forget, we do this thing every Wednesday, 3 p.m. Eastern on our YouTube channel, and you can catch this wherever you catch your
streaming
podcasts.
stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's it. Take care. We'll catch you next week.